I always say Band-Aid over the mouth, hands in the pocket. Any opportunity that you would be handing and taking or speaking for them, you can change. So an example is a young child, again, someone I worked with this morning, so it's like fresh in my mind. They were struggling with something as easy as many would think, hand over, take over. And it's not, because that's the act of social engagement, which welcomes others. So I told the parent, like, start with your needs, not theirs, because the attention with social anxiety on the child overwhelms them. Start with your needs. So you're going to get something, and do it hand over hand. Something like you said, start with the floaties, something like hand over hand, and have areas of motivation, like getting the ice cream cone, getting the art supply. But it may be hand over hand as a way to stimulate, because then that welcomes others to question. Because the goal isn't just be comfortable, loose as a goose. It's welcoming others to ask questions and have these contrived opportunities. And I want our listeners to know that we talk about exposures in public places and out and about and the kind of the typical, but there's also exposures when you're setting up games for young kids and goals for others. Something like interviews or the Guess Who game, where the kids are bringing their little toys to hand and take and show off their knowledge to Aunt Sally and Uncle Bill. That's an exposure. And that's building skills. And one more thing, because I'm going to forget, is that all the work, and I know you feel the same, but sometimes parents are like, but I want them just to talk in school. And I'll say, you know what? All the work you're doing out and about, out of school, is getting them ready, building those pathways for school. So you're not in school with me. Of course, that's where a lot of our programs with the, Brave Buddies, the Communicamp, et cetera, are the school environment. But the more you're practicing, the more you're creating these opportunities, the more it will get easier for them in school.
Yeah, and the hope is that and kind of what we know about what happens when they do these practices elsewhere, is that there should be generalization of gains, right? So that it's not just, and sometimes we see it, sometimes it's a little trickier to get that generalization into maybe the most challenging place, right? That the place or that activity that is kind of at the top of their hierarchy or the top of that ladder. But we know that it should generalize from one situation to another, and that hopefully if they're practicing even in something that's slightly easier, the hope is that maybe the ranking or how hard that other practice is now going to feel a little bit easier because they've been able to do something that was kind of the same, it was similar. And so we see that those numbers start to really decrease in terms of kind of where they're rating that on their hierarchy. And I think that's the amazing thing about working with anxiety in general, is just like it's fascinating watching, like, even something that may not be exactly the same exposure, but that it starts to really help their overall sense of, I am okay. I have the coping abilities to get through this. I can manage myself in these situations. So then it's more likely that they're going to be able to engage in the next thing that they're being asked to do. So we want them to be kind of doing these exposures, like you're saying, not just in like that one setting that might feel the most challenging, but it's almost like those are ways to kind of keep those floaties on, right? Until they get to the part that is more challenging. And even thinking about how do we break down the most challenging exposures into easier ones, so that they're also they're kind of working on that as well over time, so that by the time they get to that top, rung on the ladder, it's already feeling like it's 5 steps down. Like it's not as hard as they thought it was going to be. And I think that's an amazing kind of light bulb moment that can go off for the kids, but also for the parents. Because I think one thing we also want to be mindful of too is having parents, again, it's kind of a tricky balance, I think, sometimes, of like not being overly confident that their kid can do anything that they put them into, but also expressing confidence that, like, I know you can do this. It's maybe really, really hard, and I know that you are capable. I know you can do this, even if it's like the hardest thing that you feel like you're doing, but I know you can. You have the strength to do that. And so I think that's one thing that where parents struggle a little bit in terms of pushing versus like really feeling confident. I know that you've got this. I'm here. We can do this together. And then I know you can do that like on your own. It's a tricky thing.
appreciate what you're saying. I had just written an article called Courage Isn't Loud. And I wrote it because there are people that aren't as experienced in the field that don't see this as anything but let's get you to talk. And what I really appreciate you're saying is there's kids that just aren't there yet. And they have to start with the simpler, just sit down, build a connection, have someone facilitate, handing something, playing a game without worrying about voice. Because if those kids aren't ready, you're causing more anxiety and more avoidance. And we got a lot of feedback on that particular post. And I knew that we would, because we hear, as you do, so many families that come to us where it's like, my child's shutting down, my child's having fits, my child's having tantrums. It's like, your child should not be. Like, you aren't meeting them where they're at. They're not having the right amount of floaties on, as you just said. Like, you need to meet them where they're at so they feel confident. And one of the things that's great is there's great experts out there. There's great treatment providers. But that's who guides you. Like, I tell families, like, the goal is that we learn and we share that with you. So what we're telling you that you need to do or the things to work on to help you, that's where your child is at. And that's where you start. But if you're trying to figure it out and your child's having a tantrum over it and freaking out and throwing things, then no, you're not meeting them where they're at.